Hello, PORAC members. All of us in law enforcement understand that legislation is being written during times of great division in California. I begin most mornings reviewing the bills that are being promulgated, listening to the discussions within the Capitol. I wanted you to see and hear what is being said so that you can get a sense of the atmosphere surrounding public policy. The following video segment are comments made by legislators at a recent Senate Public Safety hearing regarding SB 1421 by Senator Skinner. PORAC wants to be collaborative as we move forward. It is our goal to do everything possible to assist our members as they protect and serve their communities. We will respond with a directness and honesty that reflects the challenges associated with our profession.
Yes. Senator Bradford.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and I want to thank the author for bringing this common sense measure forward. And let me preface my statement by stating there's probably no tougher job than being a police officer. Without a doubt, it is a tough job. But just because a job is tough doesn't give you free rein to kill people, unaccountable. And it doesn't allow you to be exempt from having the same type of scrutiny and investigation of any other employment situation here. My real problem right now is that we really don't have a problem with our criminal justice system. We have a race problem here in California and America. That's the real problem. And I respect all of you up there, but look at you. It's not a single minority who has represented law enforcement or DAs since I've been in this legislature. And in fact, that you don't even have people of color representing law enforcement speaks volumes to the mindset. And there has been a FBI study that says law enforcement has had the greatest infiltration of white supremacists in the last 10 years than any other organization. So why aren't we investigating and bringing that data forward? I think this is a common sense measure. Community-based policing does not exist in minority communities. It consists of in your lokes looking straight ahead and mean mugging somebody if you do look over at them. Take off the glasses, understand, and no Miss Jackson, no Mr. Smith, but you don't. I've lived it. I've lived it. I have friends who are in law enforcement who have spent their career, and they would be here today if their job wasn't in jeopardy, telling you about the biases that exist, not only in those communities, but on those departments for those minority officers as well. But we find a way to mute that testimony and mute those discussions. We need to have a real honest discussion about not only law enforcement in this state, in this country, but race. Because Reverend James Lawson, who was Dr. King's right-hand disciple and the teacher of nonviolence, clearly stated a couple of weeks ago as we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. King, he says, America really has to change its heart. It's not about guns, it's about the heart and the evil in men's heart. And just because you have a gun and a badge and a uniform doesn't make you perfect. There are a lot of evil people who wear the gun and wear that badge and wear that uniform, and it doesn't make them perfect. And that's where we need to really understand. I have friends in law enforcement who will tell you there is no reverence for life when it comes to minorities. Look at everyone who has testified. There's a common thread. Everyone who has testified of losing someone has been a minority. Everyone who has testified has been a minority. Why doesn't law enforcement fear for their lives when they approach white guys with guns? They never fear for their lives. But anytime a black man's running down the street, running from the police with a cell phone, he's shot 20 times. You know why black folks run from police? Because we fear the police. We fear the police, and we need to fix that.
I know you expect.
I am upset. Yes, really.
I know.
I want to thank the audience for allowing him to speak before you started clapping, because we need to hear all sides. And so I just want to thank you for the timing. Senator Bradford, did you want to address the bill at all?
I addressed the bill. I think it's a common sense measure that needs to be supported. I strongly support it. That's why I'm a co-author. And we need more measures for transparency when it relates to law enforcement. So I strongly support this measure.
Senator Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's condescending to suggest to this committee that law enforcement who operate their jobs under the color of authority should and can be compared to any other employee group across the board. That's a sophomore argument, and I think we need better. If we're going to engage in meaningful debate to come up with policies that are relevant and helpful to all of California, then we all need to come to the table with relevant debate, and that's not it. Conduct that is entirely lawful and within reason, well, I would argue that perhaps that is in the eye of the beholder, and that that's the absolute crux of the issue at hand. Conduct that is entirely lawful and within reason. And tragically, I think it's our collective experience that bias, both explicit and implicit, impacts one's perception of conduct that is within reason. And until we all collectively accept that to be true, we will never find a solution. I think that you are completely and utterly out of touch with the realities of how those you are representing are perceived by major segments of California. And you are not going to be able to continue to lobby your way out of it. This bill, SB 1421, that I have the pleasure of supporting Senator Skinner as co-author, has bipartisan co-authorship. It is a much more limited than prior versions of the bill that would have returned California to the days prior to limitations imposed in 2006. There are a number of restrictions placed on the information that is disclosed, including redaction of personal information of officers, their families, and witnesses. So the ongoing debate about how officers have to be protected to empower them to do their job is not a viable argument. If you don't understand that we have a fundamental problem with policing in this country, then we have a bigger problem than I can imagine. And law enforcement is going to have to wake up and come to grips with how they are perceived, their bias, and the fact that the greater community is no longer going to stand idly by and not have meaningful public policy conversations about police officer Bill of Rights and all of the other protections that have been put in place by legislative bodies like these over the years. Those days are over, fundamentally. And if you don't get that, you're not representing the people who are putting their lives on the line every day, who are sworn officers. If you don't get that as their representatives here, then you're not representing them fairly, fundamentally. I'm proud to support the bill. I appreciate the comments that they are willing to continue to engage, because I think based on the number of reforms we've put in place, I think law enforcement representatives understand that they're going to have to, because we have a legislature and a governor that does get the fact that we have a problem in this state and this country, and we will continue to take action. There have been bills that you all have successfully, once been passed and signed into law, have been overturned in the courts, but we'll keep coming back because we have to, because there are major segments of this state who are victims of implicit and explicit bias every day. Perhaps the next bill needs to be mandatory implicit bias testing for all all sworn officers and those who represent them in the halls of the legislature. Maybe we begin there. We have to have frank, meaningful conversations and real policy discussions, and not sophomoric arguments that you know have no bearing on the real policy in question. I'll be supporting the bill today.